Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. And what we wanted to do today is kind of give our community an update on some of the targeted gang violence that we have been dealing with in Orange County over the past several months. And if you remember last time we met here, 2 innocent children had been gunned down in acts of targeted gang violence in less than 24 hours. Sadly, we are still looking for those killers. And just a reminder that we have increased the reward for both those homicides to $20,000. So please call Crime Line. We know there are members out there in our community who can help us solve these cases. And we are pleading once again for them to come forward and take those murderers off the street. So we also want you to know that your tips from the community are working. So you see here to my left, tips we received in the murder of 14-year-old DeQuervius Fudge, who was shot on Cypress Street August 5th, led detectives to 3 suspects in this case. One of those suspects, 18-year-old Lorenzo Hall, is still at large. So we would ask anyone with information on his whereabouts to call Crime Line or 911. So just 3 weeks ago, we told you about our ongoing efforts and the operation that we have here. And I think we had mentioned that we had made 20 arrests and seized more than 24 firearms in that specific operation. Today, just for this targeted gang operation, we've made now over 75 arrests and have taken more than 50 guns out of the hands of gang members. And so for Orange County, that adds to our total of over 900 guns taken off the streets in Orange County. Of those more than 50 guns, 18 of those guns were stolen. So that's an important reminder for the community. One of the ways they're getting these firearms is, people get lazy and they leave their firearms in their cars, and many of those firearms are stolen from being unsecured in vehicles. Some of the guns that were stolen are pistols that shoot high-powered rifle rounds that can go through walls and can go through body armor that law enforcement wears. So the focus on this targeted gang violence remains our #1 priority, along with these agencies behind me. So our internal task force here, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, is working very hard, but we also are working with our partners, with the Orlando Police Department, with the FBI, with the State Attorney's Office, with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because the bad guys, they cross jurisdictional lines all the time, and the cases that we have will be OPD cases, and OPD cases might transfer over to Orange County cases. So in fact, our intense focus on gang violence enabled one of our agents to positively identify the shooting that the Orlando Police Department worked at the Mall Millennia from surveillance video, because he was so familiar with the gang members, and he was apprehended within hours of that shooting. So again, I'm standing here with members of the Orlando Police Department, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and also the FBI, Ron Hopper, who's going to talk about FBI's involvement in this operation through the FBI Safe Streets. But this time I'll introduce Deputy Chief Jose Velez from the Orlando Police Department.
Thank you, Sheriff. And thank you to all our local and federal partners for the continued cooperation addressing these shootings. So far this year, the city of Orlando has seen over 200 shootings, where the vast majority of them are suspected gang-related. Our gang unit has seized 95 firearms so far this year, many of them connected to these same shootings. We have also made over 100 gang-related arrests. But we cannot arrest our way out of this. The community involvement is a must. The Orlando Police Department has a long history of mentorship and community involvement opportunities for our youth, from Operation Positive Direction and Dueling Dragons to our Youth Outreach Liaison Program. These programs serve as an opportunity for the agency to assess crime among teenage youth, build trusting interactions, and engage youth offenders in community programs and services. We encourage anyone who is listening that wants to know more to email youthconnect@orlando.gov.
Good afternoon. My name is Ron Hopper, and I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI here in Orlando. And I'm here today because we share in the commitment to rid our neighborhoods of these violent criminal street gangs. The FBI Safe Streets Task Force is an initiative wherein the FBI joins forces with our state, local, and federal partners, such as Sheriff Mina and Chief Rolone, to eradicate violent criminal street gangs from our community. We do this by utilizing the individual resources of each participating agency to collectively attack the problem. While the FBI typically doesn't telegraph our moves, what I can tell you is that these two gangs, the 438 gang and the Army gang, have got our attention now. Members of these two gangs can start looking forward towards serving lengthy, meaningful federal prison sentences in their future. It will be through these arrests that we intend to significantly disrupt and ultimately dismantle both criminal organizations. And I would encourage everyone or anyone that has any information regarding the criminal activity of these criminal organizations to notify the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Orlando Police Department, or the FBI 24-hour command center at 813-253-1000. Thank you.
All right, so we're happy to take some questions related to this case. Yeah.
Yes, Eric Sandoval, News 6. I actually have a question for the FBI.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
So this Safe Streets Task Force, when did you guys start working? I know this is probably a lengthy operation that you've been doing with these agencies. When were you brought in on the operation for 438 in the Army? And what do you plan to accomplish? How do you plan to accomplish?
So we were advised of the ongoing situation probably a little over a month ago, and we started doing what we call pre-assessment phase on the different individuals that are involved in the criminal organizations. We went overt with our participation during the shooting at the Mall Millennia, and that's when we started working very closely with the United States Attorney's Office and identifying specific people whose names I'm not going to share for obvious reason that we are targeting in this investigation. And we're looking at federal charges, anything from racketeering, RICO, all the way up to and including different violations for firearms charges, acts of violence, things like that. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us about what specific type of resources you are adding to this effort? And then, Sheriff, can you talk about how those additional resources are helping the effort when it comes to this gang issue?
Absolutely. So what's nice about the FBI is we bring the Safe Streets Task Force initiative to help all of our state and local partners like Sheriff Mina. Sheriff Mina is a very good supporter, as is Chief Rolone, of the Safe Streets Task Force and has been advocate supporters for several years. The different things that we do at the FBI, because of our resources and our reach, as Sheriff mentioned, we're able to reach outside of the jurisdictional boundaries of Orange County and Orlando Police Department. We have not only field offices across the 50 states with 56 field offices, we also have legal attaches outside of the United States. So if and when these types of investigations lead to bigger organizations, we can actually make those ties. The other thing we're able to do and fortunate to do is we can use sophisticated techniques that take some time. We are not as reactive as the local police departments are. So we can do things like long-term undercover operations up to and including wiretap investigations and the like. So those are the type of things we bring, whereas the sheriff and the chief are oftentimes having to react with local resources at things that are happening right now. We're able to develop a big picture of the investigation and target the entire organization as a whole. Sir?
I get a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you want the sheriff to? Yep.
Yeah, I think Ron answered it pretty well, but, both the Orange County Sheriff's Office and the Orlando Police Department give resources to the FBI through task force agents. And, having that close partnership, just like was said, helps us work these long-term investigations, helps with federal prosecution, which many times leads to longer and tougher sentences and could be a deterrent. So, we've always partnered with the FBI, but we wanted their help specifically in this case, FBI Safe Streets, to help target these violent gang members in our community.
quick. What can you say to residents? I mean, this latest shooting at Mall of Millennium boiled over to a very public place. And so this is really impacting anybody who visits or lives in Orange County. What can you say to residents about their safety going out?
So what I will say is, if you see something suspicious, to call 911 or crime line. If it's something that's happened right away, obviously call 911 and know that the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Orlando Police Department, the FBI, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, we are all working together collectively to ensure the safety of our community. And I will tell you, you see the 75 arrests that Orange County has made just during this operation, all the arrests the Orlando Police Department has made this past year involving gang members. It will have an impact, a direct impact on the safety of this community. I'm positive of that.
So a lot of these victims and suspects are teenagers. Has there been any effort to connect this gang activity to school truancy? And if so, what do we do about that?
So, we're very familiar with the gang members and their activity. And I will say that, many times these are people who aren't in school, and that is one aspect to look at. But for us, it's very difficult. They, like we said earlier in last press conference, they don't stop their cars for the police, for marked units. They certainly aren't going to stop for an officer or a deputy in uniform. So, we have a truancy unit, we have school resource deputies. So that's not the way that we're going to be successful in targeting them. The way that we're going to be successful here is to basically put them behind bars for a very, very long time and take their guns away. Now, just like Deputy Chief Velez mentioned, with our younger youth that are growing up, and even those the youth that are on the edge and could go down that wrong or right path. I was one of those kids growing up. That's why we have all those programs. That's why we put all those resources into our community. Just at the sheriff's office, we seize a lot of drug money. So these past 2 years, we've given $220,000 to local nonprofit community groups here in Orange County to help with youth mentoring and to help get these kids on the right path. We have a very robust juvenile civil citation program for kids that may commit low-level offenses, and but unfortunately, we're talking about violent offenders here who have no regard for law and certainly don't care about their truancy at school.
Agent Holland, the fact that you're here, your presence, can you talk about, is this something that you feel these gangs are spreading outside of Orange County? Is this an area that maybe you're looking at as Central Florida as a whole? How big of a situation are we dealing with here? That, in other words, is it going outside of Orange County?
It's a great question. I will tell you my primary concern is the level of violence. That's specifically why we are involved, because of the level of violence that we're seeing in our community. That's not to say that they don't have associates, and I think you're going to hear a little bit about associates that may not be actual gang members of this specific gang, but they associate with the gang. So as I mentioned, our reach goes well beyond the county and the city jurisdiction. And when and where we see those associates engaged in some of these conspiracy activities, we're going to go after them too. So right now, I'm not concerned that they are overtaking the state of Florida. I'm just concerned with the brazen acts of violence that they will do in broad daylight, knowing that deputy sheriffs and police officers are around the corner. It's unsatisfactory and it needs to be dealt with. Sir?
So with respect to these two groups, the 438 gang, obviously you can't go into specifics, but can you give us a ballpark for how big these organizations are, how many people are dealing with?
You want the gang guys to talk about that? Oh, we have the gang guys talk about it.
Estimated gang size for each gang, we estimate them to have 50 plus members. That's just a rough estimate. We obviously don't want to give out the exact number of members that we have documented, but I would say each group is roughly around 50 members plus or minus some. If that kind of gives
Do you guys have a hierarchy of who's in charge and that sort of thing?
We have gang intelligence that we've been working on for years with these different gang groups involved in this. So we do have a breakdown of members that are in the group. We're not going to go into further detail about the hierarchy of each one of the gangs, though.
Is it drugs? Is it music?
So a lot of these gangs that are involved in this violence, they'll range from burglaries, whether it's vehicle burglaries, commercial burglaries. That's how they'll target these vehicles to get their firearms used in the violence. They'll target gun stores and commercial burglaries to attain more firearms to use in the violence. And they also attain money from doing these vehicle burglaries, commercial burglaries. There is a drug nexus that's in some of the gangs that are involved. It doesn't seem to be the huge push in these two gangs is the drug nexus, but there is a drug nexus there. And the rapping seems to be a nexus that's also there with these two groups.
Are these kids habitual offenders? And if so, isn't there a program to monitor habitual offenders, and are they being monitored?
Out of the 75 arrests we made during this detail, I want to say we're right around only 15 juveniles have been arrested. So most of our arrests that we made in this detail have been adults. Some of the juveniles that have been arrested do have lengthy criminal histories and have been arrested for firearms charges as part of the detail.
Could you give us your name just in case?
Paul Volkerson.
And then I have another question for the sheriff. We also had another shooting on the other side, and that was described as violent and violent on motorcycle. What's the difference between a group like that and the gangs that we're seeing over here? And why differentiate?
Right. So the shooting this morning that you're referring to that took 3 lives, that was at a warehouse, a private warehouse, a motorcycle club, had a gathering there. And shots were fired there, and unfortunately 3 people killed. But this is not, that was isolated to that group of people, and we're still trying to work through exactly how and why that happened. We know there was a confrontation of some sort, but has nothing to do with the targeted gang violence that we're seeing here on the west side of Orange County. And, to my knowledge, and like I said, we're still working through this and still preliminary, this group, this motorcycle club hasn't been involved in any type of shootings or violence or anything of this sort.
So it's more of an internal issue?
It appears preliminarily that all these people knew each other, and it was some kind of internal, argument or confrontation. We're still trying to work through that.
Sheriff, you said earlier in October that you identified suspects in the shooting of the 3-year-old boy and Joshua Atkinson. Where are we with that, and why have there been no arrests yet?
So no, I haven't identified any suspects in that case. I think you're talking maybe an interview I did with the Sentinel where I said that we had people identified in one of those murders. What I was talking about was the murder of Aquarius Fudge. So those 2 on the bottom there have been arrested and charged with murder. And of course, Lorenzo Hall, we're still looking for, want him to turn himself in.
What can you say about the search for the killers of these 2, though? I talked with Barb Bergen over at Crime Line, and she says tips are just not coming in.
Well, in this case, on the shooting that happened, I think it was August 5th on Cypress Street, tips did leave our homicide investigators 2 arrests in this case. So any piece of information that you can give us, whether it be a name or a car or an address, it might be that last piece that we are looking for and all. And so part of this is asking the community who knows all the people that are involved in these gangs and these cases to come forward and please send in your tips. And, it could, it not only is the right thing to do, but it could make you, $20,000 richer in those 2 cases.
Agent Hopper, is it safe to say that your agency will be helping find the killers of these children?
Absolutely.
To follow up also with Dave, you said that those neighborhoods would have more presence by your office or by your deputies. Can you talk a little bit about the extra efforts you put into the communities?
Yeah, so there is a large portion of the Orange County Sheriff's Office, whether it be marked vehicles, many unmarked and even plainclothes deputies and detectives are out in these neighborhoods doing surveillance, trying to catch the perpetrators carrying illegal firearms, but also prevent future shootings. And I think they're doing a great job. And like I said, all the Orlando Police Department as well, with the Orange County Sheriff's Office and with FBI, we put a lot of resources into it. It is our top priority right now in Orange County.
And one more follow-up, you said a lot of people were calling, or you asked for people if they saw a gun going into a car, or if you saw people loading guns into a car. Have those tips started to come in? Have you heard more about it?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but we're still asking people, if you see someone with a gun, with someone who's loading a gun, with someone who is carrying a gun into a car, and you think that to be suspicious, to please let us know, and we could prevent the next shooting.
One more question for Agent Hopper. Can you put into layman's terms what these RICO charges would mean for gang members?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So the racketeering violations include things like homicide, robbery, drug distribution. And what we do is we look at taking all of those individual charges and collectively grouping them together into a racketeering enterprise investigation, and we charge them as a group. Another thing we do is we look at continuing criminal enterprises, and these are all federal statutes that carry heavy prison sentences, and that's one of the things we bring to the table. So on a continuing criminal enterprise, if we identify 5 or more people in a hierarchy structure, as was asked about earlier, then we can charge them as a criminal organization in that hierarchy and get additional prison time.
Agent Hopper, can
Yes,
you
ma'am.
say whether the FBI is involved in other metros in doing like similar kind of stuff in terms of gang violence? Like, has the gang violence in like Tampa or Miami reached this like level that you're talking about here in Orange?
That's a great question. So we have over 170 Safe Streets task forces across the nation in all 50 states. I would not say that this is anything but on par with what we're seeing. The COVID epidemic obviously has kind of helped them to, lash out and release some steam, in addition to all the recent violence associated with some of the protesting. And so this is nothing I'm overly concerned about. I'm not worried about us turning into a Chicago, but that's also why we're here doing what we're doing and working closely with our partners.
And what are the other ones in Florida?
So we have them in Miami, we have them in Jacksonville, and then obviously in Tampa. And then some of our what we call resident agencies have satellite task forces off of the Safe Streets Task Force, and they have their own smaller task forces like you would see in Sarasota, Fort Myers, places like that.
Agent Hopper, we've heard a lot about Army and Force Grenades. I'm curious though, is there an X number of gangs that you guys are monitoring? And also kind of a follow-up to that is, are smaller gangs being either recruited or brought into these larger gangs?
So we see both the what we call the neighborhood-based street gangs, such as these that don't have the nationally affiliated names like the Crips and the Bloods, but at the same time, we do have investigations ongoing into the larger sects like the Bloods.
And are these guys recruiting those other street gangs?
I wouldn't say specifically recruiting. It all depends, believe it or not, on neighborhood affiliation and also familial relations. If they are related to somebody in the gang, sometimes we'll see crossover, and other times we'll see gangs supporting one another, which tends to be somewhat of a concern, but no, not specific to this group.
We're going to do one last question if anybody has one. If not, thank you very much.